This episode is brought to you by the Solo to Group Practice webinar. It's a free webinar that you can find at practiceoftherapy.com/group, and also brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 178 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined me. Hope you're having a good weekend, whenever you might be listening to this. And so I'm so excited for you to get to hear from my good dear friend, Whitney Owens again. Whitney and I got to know each other I guess it's been 2 or 3 years now, probably longer, but we were in a mastermind group together. In fact, we're in a mastermind group together now. And we're going to be talking about, in this particular episode, just a whole plethora of subjects, from anywhere from starting a group practice to getting into consulting, and even a little bit there about the Enneagram, which I know that Whitney is passionate about, and she's been really a person that's gotten me interested in that this past year. But one of the things about Whitney, I'll say before we get to her, is that she has a podcast called Faith and Practice Podcast. And one of the things about that I want to share is that, and I've mentioned this a few times, but one of the things about me is I wear kind of 2 hats in a way, or several hats a lot of times. But I'm also a clergy person in the Episcopal Church. For those familiar with the Episcopal Church, it's really the Anglican or the Church of England here in the United States. But anyway, I'm a deacon in the Episcopal Church. So in the Episcopal Church, that's considered a clergy person. But anyway, I've had a lot of theological training and that sort of thing, in addition to my therapy training. And as I like to tell my clients is that I've got that background, but I don't have a religious agenda with my therapy or my counseling. But if those are ever things they want to talk about, I love talking about those things and have a lot of fun talking about those things, but you're not going to hear that from me first. And the other thing I'd like to say about that is that, regardless of your background, because I know that there are people out there that don't identify as Christian or really don't identify as any religion, I just want to let you know that there are those of us that consider ourselves Christian that don't fall into that category of evangelical Christians or conservative Christians. And Whitney's in that category as well. And so I just want to clarify that, because I know for some people, when we throw out the word religion or Christianity, that can be a turnoff for people. I don't apologize for that, but at the same time, just want to clarify that there are many different paths when it comes to religion and ways of following what we believe. So anyway, just wanted to kind of put that out there. But the other thing is that Whitney is in the mastermind group that I'm a part of right now. And so we're also going to be talking some in this episode just about what it means to be a consultant and how she got into doing consulting, and part of my journey with that as well. So, but anyway, we'll get to Whitney here in just a moment, and sorry for this long introduction. But before we get to Whitney, I would like to invite you to go over and check out a free resource that I've put together along with my friend, Dr. David Hall. And it's a webinar. It's an automated webinar called Solo to Group Practice. And in this webinar, we teach people how to think about going into group practice, because going into group practice for a lot of folks is the next logical step in their private practice development. And there are some folks that just prefer to stay solo, and that's fine and good too. And one of the things about this webinar is if you're thinking about it or kind of sitting on the fence, this would be a great webinar to watch and listen to with my friend Dr. David Hall. We go through some of the pitfalls of of owning a group practice. We also talk about some of the advantages and how it can create more income for your practice and for yourself. Also just talk about some of the lessons we've learned along the way in this particular webinar. But anyway, I'd like to invite you to go check that out. Again, it's a free webinar, and it's an on-demand webinar in the sense that you schedule the time at which you want to watch it. And it's about 60 minutes long, so it's not a whole lot of time commitment. But if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/group, you can get access to that free webinar. And also just be sure and stick around to the end, because we've got some bonuses and some discounts that you can take advantage of with some of the other educational courses that we've got available. So be sure and check that out, practiceoftherapy.com/group. Also, I'd like for you to check out TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for private practice owners. In fact, they are the highest rated by several places for mental health providers in private practice. If you want to take the stress out of your practice or stress out of things that you're doing, you can use TherapyNotes for scheduling, for filing insurance claims. They also have a telehealth portal and also a patient portal that's second to none. It just will help you streamline and automate so much better in your practice. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can get 2 months of their services for free. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. And without further ado, here's my conversation with my dear friend, Whitney Owens. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so thrilled to have my dear, dear friend, Whitney Owens, back with me on the podcast. So, Whitney, I think you're pushing the envelope for the number of appearances, or I don't guess it's appearances on a podcast, but people know what I mean. So glad you're here.
Oh, always love coming on your show, Gordon.
Yes. And so Whitney has got a podcast herself, the Faith and Practice podcast. And it's one of those that I listen to every week. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so, Whitney, tell folks that maybe don't know you a little bit about you and your journey and how you've landed where you landed.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gordon. Well, I always appreciate when anyone listens to my show, but much more so when it's someone who has their own podcast and knows what the world is like. So thank you for taking the time to listen. Yeah, so I'm Whitney Owens. I live in Savannah, Georgia, which is the South. I have the beach here right beside me, which is really nice. I have 2 children, ages 8 and 4. And then I also am married to a minister. His name is James P. Owens. Yep. And he actually just got his ordination come through for the Methodist Church.
Yay. So congratulations to James.
Yes. It's been a long road for us. So we're really happy about that. So I have a group practice here in Savannah called Water's Edge Counseling. There are 8 clinicians. I have been knocking on as many doors as possible to add number 9, but in the world we're living in, it's so hard to find a therapist right now. And then I have a couple of admin stuff that help with answering phones and marketing and things like that. We are a cash pay practice, so it's a little unique about us. And then we also have a faith background with most of our therapists that can kind of bring that in when appropriate, but not something that we push on our clients by any means. And we do not overtly market ourselves as a faith-based practice. And then along with all the work I do with the group practice, I also am a business consultant with Practice the Practice. And I have a special niche within faith-based practices, as well as helping people start group practices and then how to market a cash pay practice.
Wow. Yeah. And so Whitney and I have recently started a mastermind group together with two other folks. And in this, if you've been listening to the podcast for the last few weeks, you've gotten to hear from Uriah Guilford and Jessica Tapana. And we're such a great little group. And we're just having a great time talking about, life balance stuff and, what we're doing as consultants and then practice owners and all that sort of thing. And so, Whitney, how do you manage all that you're managing? Because I think a lot of people would be really curious about that. You've got two little ones at home, you've got your church work, you've got your practice work, and then you're doing consulting. How do you do it?
It's a good question. I ask myself that every day. Yeah, it's not perfect, right? I think the most important thing is that we provide ourselves grace and acceptance, and that when a day doesn't go the way I want it to, or maybe I don't prioritize the way I wish I had, like we learn from it and we make better choices moving forward, but not to beat ourselves up over it. And so I think for me, a big part has been delegating. And not just in my practice, because we hear that all the time, but really in my life, that I rely a lot on my husband. Like if I need help saying, hey, honey, I need you to do this so that I can do this. I think a lot of us are scared, or at least I was scared for a time to say, I need help, but he's right there wanting to help and wanting to do things. And the same, he comes to me, hey, I need help with this thing. Can you take the kids to this or do this or make dinner? I don't actually cook. He does all the cooking. So if he's asking me to cook, that's a big deal. But yeah, so I might be cooking or doing something for him. So it kind of goes back and forth with that. And then just setting your life up with the people that you need, having really good friends, having a support network at your church. They really helped me with my child. One of my children has special needs. She's autistic, my youngest one. And so we really need a lot of extra help with her. And so having a church community that really cares and has a great children's ministry has been helpful. And then I also have a nanny that comes to the house a few days a week, even more so during all this COVID stuff. I mean, my oldest still is only half time in school. So we have to have somebody with her when she's doing her virtual school, because they can't do virtual school by themselves in second grade.
Yeah. So it's a lot to manage. And I know that's been kind of a theme our last mastermind group. One of the things I know that you started is doing a time study, and you want to, maybe we can share a little bit about kind of the logic behind that and why somebody would want to do that.
I think a time audit's really important because our time gets away with us and we have no idea where we spend it. I was just doing it. I'm doing it right now where I write down, okay, here's what I just did with this. Here's what I did with this. And of course, having my group practice and being a consultant, I kind of wear both hats during the day. I'll go from a text with a consultee asking me something to seeing a client in my group practice. I think it's important that we kind of watch where we're spending our time with those. In fact, I was just checking both emails before we jumped on here. So I was like, wait, that's the practice email. That's my group practice email, and knowing the difference. And then also just from a financial standpoint saying, and this is for anyone who has a side hustle and a practice, like, okay, well, where am I spending my time and which one's actually bringing me more income? Which one brings more income with less time that I have to put into it? There's a lot of other things we need to think about, of course, but as far as the time audit part, that's another thing I'm trying to watch. And I'm also trying to watching which one is bringing me more income for the time that I'm putting into it, but also what are the things I could delegate out more than what I'm delegating out now. And making this list really helps me to see, okay, I could probably save an hour a day if I had someone else do this, that, and the other. And I think it's really important that we look at that and think, okay, well, with that hour, I could do another webinar. I could see another client, and us really doing the things we love to do instead of doing the things we don't love to do. Like, I don't love checking my email. Sometimes I'm sending the same email over and over, and we've talked about that. So I'd rather have somebody else do that for me so I can do the work that I love, which is consulting and counseling and meeting with my team and being a CEO instead of always putting out fires, Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think is so important for people to recognize as they grow their practices is that as therapists and even consultants, the thing that we have, our product, so to speak, and I'm using air quotes as I say this, is our time and expertise. And so there's a limit to the amount of time we can devote to anything that we do. And so learning how to, like you said, Whitney, to delegate and to outsource the things that are not going to necessarily bring us a lot of income for the time that we would spend on them. It's much better to pay somebody else to do those things rather than us spend our time on it, because it doesn't necessarily bring us any income. And so that's a one premise that I think is important for people to learn as they grow their practice.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to do a time audit, even if it's once a year, some kind of regular time, because time gets away from us, and so it's important that we go back and check those things. I also wanted to kind of say here the importance of surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded and really working towards goals. And that was part of the reason we started this mastermind group. Was I wanted to be around other people that were doing consulting and running businesses and managing their families so that they could challenge me to do better. People that I admired. I said, I want to get people I admire together and talk about this stuff. And so we are the culmination. I think the quote is, we're the culmination of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Right. And so we really need to surround ourselves with other high profile business owners if you want to have a big business. That's so important.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, it's just as you mentioned, is just learning how to draw on supports, which is something we tell our clients all the time. And I think a lot of times we have to really be able to practice what we preach in terms of the support needed and being able to bounce ideas and really get to see what we're doing through a different lens, because a lot of times we get stuck in kind of where we are, and it can, and we get used, just the more stuck you are, the more stuck you are. So, I mean, that's an important piece. So I know too, Whitney and I got together. When I say got together, I mean, we got introduced to each other and kind of got to know each other. Oh gosh, it's been almost 3 years now. There was an event that Joe Sanok had hosted called Next Level Living Room. And I got to see Whitney kind of develop all of this in the background. But you want to talk about just kind of how you made the decision to kind of move into consulting and doing kind of a side hustle, so to speak?
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to share this story. Yeah. So I had my group practice and then ended up I had a solo practice and wanted to have a group practice. And that's when I started working with Joe as a consultant, because I didn't know the first thing about hiring people to my business. And I didn't want to mess that up. Like, if you're going to get some consulting, that's the time to get it, when you're really adding people to your practice. So I did that, worked with Joe for 2 years. And then I just kind of started having this little tug at my heart, I guess you could call it, that said, hey, maybe you could be a consultant and you could help people with faith-based practices. Because honestly, that's kind of what I had been looking for in a consultant. And of course, Joe did a fantastic job consulting me, but there was this element of like the faith piece that I wanted to be a little bit more a part of the consulting. So things like paying my clinicians and how do I feel about where I'm putting my money ethically, but also within my faith. How do I feel about hiring people? Do I want to have a faith-based practice or not? Do we want to only see Christians or not? How do I market my practice to bring in my ideal client who has some kind of background, but not push away people who don't have that? There were so many questions coming up that I was like, I wish I had someone that asked these questions to. And then as I've grown and did my own consulting and my own work, I started figuring these things out and through working with people. So anyway, I got this little tug in my heart to do the consulting. And to tell you the truth, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to run as far away as I could, because you know what? It's like everyone and their mother is out there becoming a consultant. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do what everybody is doing. But to tell you the real truth, beneath all that, I was just scared that I wouldn't be successful. I was scared I'd put myself out there. I'd be judged for having a faith and I wouldn't be experienced enough, or people wouldn't want to work with me, whatever the case is. And so I tried not to do it. And then I went to slow down school. And I just knew if I went to slow down school, it's going to end up becoming a consultant. Like I knew it in the back of my mind. But anyway, I went and I was on a hike and a couple of other things happened. I had a dream and some other things. But while I'm on this hike, I so clearly had this impression in my heart of Mary and Martha from the Bible with, Jesus, and Mary's the one that's washing his feet and Martha's the one really busy, right? Preparing the house and getting everything ready. And that line of Mary, Martha is busy with so many things, but Mary has focused on the most important thing. And I felt like that was like God speaking to me, not audibly, just an impression, but Whitney, you are so focused on all these details about your practice, but the thing I really need you to do is become a faith-based consultant, the thing, right? And so after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to become a faith-based consultant. And as soon as I kind of announced I was going to do that, Joe said, oh, well, you should join me and practice the practice. Like, we would love for you to be a part of this. And that was just a huge gift because honestly, my other fear was, how am I ever going to do a side gig? I don't have time to create a website and all the things that go into that. And so jumping on with practice gave me an immediate leg up in him marketing me and a great team to be a part of. And now I have a podcast which goes through practice. So it's like that has been such a gift for me to be able to do what I'm passionate about. So that's kind of how it started, and God has blessed it. And I think every time we step out and what God wants us to do, we get closer to God. Like I feel so much better in my faith as I've grown closer to him, as I've had to trust him through all this. And I've had the honor of seeing lots of practices grow and change and people find their own dreams. And it's been neat to be a part of that.
Right. Yeah, I love that story. And it was so great to feel honored to be kind of in the background when some of that was happening for Whitney. And I think that's, regardless of your faith background or whatever, whether you identify as Christian or even, no really affiliation at all to any sort of religious thing. I think it's so important to be able to follow your passion and what you feel kind of led to follow, because I think when we do that, that really puts us in a place where we're really going to open the doors for ourselves. I've mentioned Whitney and I have talked about Joseph Campbell before, but there's a quote by Joseph Campbell that's just simply follow your bliss. And when you do that, that'll put you in a place where the world will open up to you in ways that you've never known before. And so regardless of your faith tradition or regardless of how you practice that or not, I think that's so important for us to be able to approach it in that way. It goes back to what people hear from me all the time is know your why, know your convictions behind things. And so I think that's so important. So yeah. So one of the things too, just kind of, Whitney and I have just kind of developed a lot of really cool stories just around private practice. But one that I want you to tell, Whitney, is about the time that you met Mike Michalowicz.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's like there's some blessing and some sadness here at the end of it. So Mike Michalowicz, I love his stuff and had read Prophet first. And I had also read Clockwork. I think it's in Clockwork that he talks about the Savannah Bananas. Actually, it might be in both. But anyway, I knew that he was a fan of the Bananas. Okay. And the Savannah Bananas, if you don't know, is like, and it's not a minor league. It's like before minor league baseball team. These are college kids that come here and play in the summer, hoping that someone will recruit them to the minor leagues. It's a really silly baseball team. You should go check them out if you haven't anyway. So they were in the book, and I thought to myself, I'm going to go meet the owner of the Bananas, Jesse Cole, because he's in the books that Mike writes. And I thought, I'm going to go talk to Jesse about Mike Michalowicz because I need some Mike Michalowicz fans in Savannah. So I show up at the game. I've told my girlfriends I'm going to go talk to Jesse Cole. And then all of a sudden, I'm like getting up to go talk to Jesse. They announce on the microphone that Mike Michalowicz is at the game. I just about fell over. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. He's actually here, right? And he went out on the field and did some game. They do all these games between innings, and they had to blindfold him. And he was on his hands and knees trying to get $100 bill, and the crowd had to scream for which direction to go. Then right after that, of course, I followed him around, and I finally got to him. So he was here for the baseball game. It was the opening game of the season, but he also had Profit First professionals, like 50 of them that were here for a conference. And this was part of the conference, was going to the game. So I got to talk to him for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. We took a selfie together and he's just fantastic. And of course, tip here, if you meet somebody in person, get their phone number. You never know when you're going to text them. So it was 2 years later, I texted him and said, I don't know if you remember me. And I took the picture and I sent it to him to remind him who I was. And I said, I host a podcast. Will you please come on? This was before the podcast started. And he said, definitely. He was like, I don't know, episode 23 or something. So anyway, but I just have to say the sad part here is I went to another game a few weeks later and Donald Miller was there.
Oh, wow.
Donald Miller. And my little girl was screaming crazy and my husband was there for a work event. And so then Jesse Cole was like, you want to meet Donald Miller? And I was like, yes, but my baby's crying and I have to leave. So I never got to meet Donald Miller. So hopefully he will come back to the Savannah Bananas game.
Yeah. Oh, I love those stories of just kind of, what is it? Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees from separation from anybody but Donald, for those that don't know, Donald Miller has a podcast called the Story Brand Podcast. I think they changed the name of it now. But anyway, it's one of the best resources for marketing and understanding marketing. And Mike Michalowicz's book, Profit First, is one that I always recommend to anybody that's going into private practice and that sort of thing. So, Whitney, I love these stories, and I think there's a lot of different ways we could go here. But one of the things that I know you've got coming up are some trainings and some opportunities for people to join mastermind groups and that sort of thing. You want to talk about that?
Would love to. Yeah. So one of my favorite things about consulting is the group work that I get to do with people, and specifically mastermind groups, because you see these amazing connections come together in a small group of people who are really working on their business. So I run mastermind groups for people who have a faith-based practice. That doesn't mean they have to be overt about their faith. It just means we talk about it when appropriate, but we also work on our businesses. We work on marketing, finances, managing that. How much do you pay yourself, your employees, or just different life balance, right? We talk about all those things. So I am launching another one of those in July. It'll start, I think it's the 7th. We're going to meet every other Wednesday, July through December. So 6-month group. And just to kind of share one quick story, just to give you an idea of why I think the faith-based component is so fun and great about it. Like, one of the girls showed up to one of our groups and said, I don't know if I should close up shop or not, because COVID was going on and she was finding that maybe she could get more money by closing her business and, taking finances from the government was offering her and things like that. And so it was a tough decision for her and her family. And I don't always do this, but I just said, hey, everybody, let's really commit to praying for her some wisdom to know what to do. And so we all prayed for her, and we came back the next week and she had gotten multiple new intake calls. And that's exactly what she needed to keep moving forward. And it was just such a beautiful thing when people ask each other, not only how are you, but like, how's your faith, and how can we pray for you? And it's really neat thing. So I am launching that. If you are interested in that, you can go to practicethepractice.com/faith in practice mastermind, or it might be faith mastermind. I'd have to go back and check, but it's one of those two. You can find it just by drop downs, but yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have links here in the show summary and show notes for all of that. So, so the other thing about Whitney that has really been an inspiration to me this past year, particularly for, again, just since we're on this theme of faith-based, one of the things that I share it very, share it some, but I haven't said a whole lot about it. But one of the things about me is I'm also a clergy person in the Episcopal Church. And so during Lent, which is the season between Ash Wednesday and Easter in most liturgical churches, most people know kind of Ash Wednesday because of Mardi Gras and Fat Tuesday, which is what sets off Lent, and that's why that whole thing is there. But I don't get off too far of a tangent there. But anyway, one of the things that Whitney had kind of inspired me to do was to look at the book called The Road Back to You. And it's about the Enneagram and really kind of learning how to be the healthiest version of you. And I've just been blown away by that, and have been using that not only with some clients and that sort of thing, but starting to use it with my staff and that sort of thing. So, Whitney, you want to do a little bit on the Enneagram here?
I'll try to limit myself.
Okay.
Well, maybe I'll tell you my backstory here. I was sitting on the sofa with my husband, and he says, the Enneagram. And I had heard of the Enneagram before, but you know what? Everybody's talking about personality tests these days. So I was like, whatever. I know the Myers-Briggs. I'm good. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts explaining to me what an Enneagram type 1 is like. And one of the things he said was the Enneagram type 1 has a critical voice in their head at all times telling them how the world could be better. And I was like, what? I thought that everybody had that voice. No, honey, that's just you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it spoke so clearly to me. The other thing that was humorous about it, he said, an Enneagram type 1 carries anger. They are angry at the world for being so messed up. And I was like, I am not an angry person. I am never angry. But the truth is, ones hide their anger so well, and they're really just angry all the time. And after he said that to me, I started thinking about my anger, and I was like, I am angry. I feel it in my stomach all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was amazing how these simple things really spoke to me. And then I started doing my own work on the Enneagram, and I know myself so much better than I ever knew myself before. I can really dig into my strengths and let go of my weaknesses in a different kind of way. And so now I use it understanding other people, and helping other people know themselves. And I use it with my staff. We're actually doing our Enneagram training next week. My husband's going to come in and train the whole staff and understanding how we interact with one another. And you're talking about Donald Miller. He has some great podcast episodes too about the Enneagram at work. And then I did some podcasts back in November as well, a 4-part series on the Enneagram. But it's totally changed. I do it with all my clients. I do it with everyone I consult with, and it really helps move treatment and businesses along.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing stuff. And for those of you that are know the Enneagram or have maybe curious about it, I'll share that I'm a type 2 with a 3 wings. So that's the helper and then the achiever. So that's, and so that's, yeah. And I think we're going to probably have James and Whitney on at some point here in the future to just do another whole little series on the Enneagram, because it's fascinating stuff. And it's just so much you can do with it, just around knowing how to interact with people, and really, as much as anything, your own self-growth and your own understanding of yourself. It's just been really helpful to me in that way, of just really, even though I know a lot of stuff about the clinical side of people and psychotherapy, it's just another framework that I think is really important. So yeah. So,
and I love that you mentioned that book, because I think The Road Back to You is a really good intro book if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, but it's also a really great book if you know a lot about the Enneagram. And then there's also the podcast Typology. Both of those are by Ian Cron, but really great resources on typology. He interviews different Enneagram numbers and Enneagram experts. And so it's really fun to listen to an interview of someone that's like you and hear them talk. And you're like, that sounds just like me.
Yeah. It really is. So, well, Whitney, I know that there's so much more we could talk about, but I want to be respectful of your time. And and so tell folks how they can get in touch with you if they have questions, and particularly if they want to find out about the masterminds and all the other things that you're doing, or even if you're thinking about having a faith-based practice, or have a faith-based practice, and you really want some help of knowing how to kind of structure that, Whitney would be a great go-to for that type of thing. But tell folks how they can get in touch with you, Whitney.
Yeah. All right. So if you want to just shoot me an email, it's whitney@practicethepractice.com. And then if you're interested in the mastermind group, you can go to practicethepractice.com/faith mastermind. And there you'll learn more about it. You can sign up right there. I am doing a special deal of a discount in the month of May. So if you're interested in joining, go ahead and join now and secure your spot. If you are interested in getting on my email list, then you can go to practicethepractice.com/faith and practice resources. I try to send out stuff that's only relevant to really help you with action steps on starting and growing a faith-based practice. And if you go to that website, you can also get a free PDF on pitfalls between churches and counselors, so we can know how to better connect with churches. And then in addition, I do have 2 membership communities that I run with Allison Pigeon, who's another consultant with Practice. We have a membership community for people starting their own group practice. So if you're interested in starting a group practice and you want some help along the way, you can go to practicepractice.com/group practice launch. That program's called Group Practice Launch. And if you're a group practice member and you're just looking for ways to connect with other group practice bosses, or you really just want to get some tools on being a group practice boss, then you can go to practicepractice.com/group practice boss and learn more about the membership community that we do there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And again, we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary here for all of that. So, so if you were to maybe leave a bit of wisdom for anybody within their private practice journey, what would you say that is?
Now, maybe it's just because I'm sitting here with you, Gordon, but I would tell them to surround themselves with like-minded people that are going to encourage and push them forward. And, as we were kind of telling stories, I had one more story that came to mind. Like, I remember getting on the phone with you. You were one of the first people I said, hey, I think I'm going to join Practice and do faith-based consulting. Actually, I think I might have called you before the Practice part, just thinking about doing faith-based. Yeah, okay. I was thinking about doing faith-based consulting and didn't know if that was a good niche, didn't know if it would work. And I called you and you were so encouraging. And so it's just really important that you have wise, encouraging people in your lives to really push you forward.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Even for adults, it takes a village. And I think that's the healthy way to do it all. So, Whitney, so good to have you again. And I'm sure you will be on here again, and you will be hearing more from Whitney Owens in the future. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Whitney. As you know, we've developed quite a bond just around consulting and just what we're doing in our lives, and just a lot of parallel paths there with what we're doing. And be sure and check out Whitney's stuff, and you can get to that at practiceofthepractice.com. And also be sure and check out her podcast. For those of us that are faith-based, or we have a faith bent, it's a great podcast, and she's got some wonderful guests that she's had on there. And I know we sometimes do some swapping of guests, and so I've got a few on my short list that I've got to get in touch with Whitney about, seeing about getting on this podcast as well. But anyway, it's a wonderful community that we've got in our mastermind group, and so again, thanks to Whitney for being on the podcast. Also, before you go, be sure and check out the Solo to Group Practice webinar. And again, you can get to that at practiceoftherapy.com/group. And I think you'll find it a helpful webinar, regardless of which stage of practice you're in. Even if you already have a group practice, I think we cover some things to think about and some options there, because we just talk about some of the things that we've learned along the way. So be sure and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/group. And also be sure and check out our sponsor, TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Again, they're the leading electronic health record system and one of the most highly rated electronic health record systems for mental health providers in private practice. And again, as I've said before, they're who I use in my practice, and I'm thoroughly impressed just across the board with that platform. And it has helped automate so much of our practice and just making things easier to operate on the clinical side of things. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you'll be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services for free. So thanks, folks, again for joining me for this particular episode. It was a little bit longer one than usual, but that's okay. You can listen to it as much or as little as you want to. As my mom always says, it's yours to do with as you wish. But anyway, thanks for joining me. Be sure and take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also leave us a review. Click on the little stars there. And when you subscribe, you'll be sure to get all the updates coming up down the road. And I've got lots of guests lined up for here in the future. So be sure and check it out and subscribe. Take care, folks. Have a good rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.